The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
I do have a clip when he was on the Peter Boyle show, and I'm in a little bit of a dilemma here because I've got two different tapes from two different people talking about the authority that is associated with being a auxiliary officer or a cold case posse member or just essentially somebody who volunteers and helps law enforcement. But specifically in this case, we're talking about the cold case posse. Let me play both of those clips, and then maybe you can help me resolve my problem. Clip number one, this is Brian Riley.
Is a police officer or he has law enforcement authority is absolutely incorrect. When he gave the March 1st, 2012 press conference, he was a volunteer. When he gave the July 17th press conference, he was a volunteer, unpaid volunteer, no law enforcement authority.
Okay, now that was Brian Riley talking about you. Let me play a second clip where somebody else in Phoenix is commenting on the authority given to members of the cold case posse.
I had to give myself a little credit because I knew they really would go after me if I used taxpayers' money. So I have 3,500 volunteers called the posse. They have authority once I swear them in. Right. I have a cold case posse, so you know what? Mike Zullo was head of that cold case posse, so I mobilized him to do this. Right. So they can't get me for spending taxpayers' money, although I could.
Okay, now the second tape was Sheriff Arpaio on the Carl Gallup show, and here's my dilemma. I've got Brian Riley, who was a cold case posse member for 8 weeks, if you subtract his 2-week vacation, and then I've got Sheriff Arpaio with over a half a century of law enforcement experience, currently the sheriff of Maricopa County, and, pretty much an even contest there. I don't know which one to believe. Can you help me out, Mike?
Yeah, I think I could help you out, Mark, and I know you're being
I'm just confused. I don't know.
You're a lot smarter than you're letting on, brother.
8 weeks versus 50 years. I don't know which one I'm going to go with.
8 weeks versus 50 years, 8 weeks and fired from a part-time volunteer job versus a career law enforcement officer. Let me make it really simple for you. If I were a betting man, I would bet on Sheriff Arpaio that he understands how to transfer his authority. Let me make it really easy for your folks to understand. By state statute, by constitutional amendment in the Arizona Constitution, the sheriff is the head law enforcement officer in Maricopa County. Actually, what it really means is every municipal police department really would answer to him if he wanted to do it that way. He is permitted by our state statutes and by our Constitution to call upon citizens of Maricopa County to help him fulfill his duties. And the term used is a posse. In doing that posse action, he has the ability to assemble people, train them up per the policies and procedures and state law mandates through the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and then upon activation, and all activation means is the sheriff calls me up and says, Mike, I have an assignment for you. I need you to come down here. Are you willing to do this? Answer, yes. Okay, you're activated, and here's your level of authority, your scope of authority. And that can go right up to the powers of arrest. In this instance, Sheriff Arpaio gave me full investigational authority under the colors of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to look into this matter. Law enforcement authority. What Mr. Riley is trying to do, play a semantical game. You could go to AZ Post certification and ask, is Mike Zullo a certified police officer in the state of Arizona? The answer is no. Mike Zullo was a certified police officer in the state of New Jersey. It has no bearing on what the sheriff is able to do, and he doesn't understand what certification means. Certification simply means that you pass the state law-required testing, exams, and competency to get a job as a law enforcement officer, a paid job or a reserve status job in Arizona. certification in and of itself does not grant you law enforcement authority. Your law enforcement authority comes from the agency that you're employed. So it kind of works like this, Mark. If you were a cop on Monday pulling cars over and you quit on Tuesday, on Wednesday you would return or retain your certification for 2 years. However, you no longer have law enforcement authority. So you can't go get in your own personal car, drive around, pull people over, and issue them tickets because you do not have the authority to do that. You do not have the authority at that time to yell, police, freeze, put your gun down, because you're not a cop anymore. You may have the certification, but you lack the authority. In our state statutes and a lot of other states, out west it just happens to be called a posse. In New Jersey, it was called special police officer. Either way you look at it, they go through the same thing. They go through training, they go through in-house training, they go through testing processes, and they get authority for a specific job at a specific time. And once the authority is rescinded, all police powers are suspended. So in my case, being a former police officer, a former investigator, been with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office for 10 years at an average of 2,000 or 2,200 volunteer hours a year, racking in close to 10,000 personal hours on this issue alone over 3 years. I have been activated 3 years ago. Actually, the end of September was the third year. 3 years ago, 24/7. I have full investigational authority to do what I'm doing. That's what Sheriff Arpaio told you. Mr. Riley likes to equate me as being a paper cutout. Mm-hmm. That's pretty incredible. If the Sheriff of Maricopa County would hold 2 press conferences introducing me as his lead investigator on this task, it's pretty neat if the sheriff is a ventriloquist and can get a cardboard cutout to move its lips and talk.
You know I'm a stickler for details. He actually said plywood, not paper. I'm sorry.
Plywood. I'm sorry. We can change that if you need to change it to plywood. Okay? I know that you're really anal about stuff like this.
Oh, thank you.
But, no, Mr. Riley's playing the game, and he's trying to confuse your audience, and he's trying to diminish my ability. And this is something that Mr. Riley is known for in his past. Mr. Riley, when he went scorched earth on the sheriff, was because he got mad. From being the sheriff's biggest supporter to being the sheriff's biggest detractor, he got mad. Mr. Riley is like a chameleon. From being a rabid birther to now being an OBOT facilitator.
In all fairness, he said on the show he was never a birther, that he just wanted to get to the bottom of the document itself to find out the truth about the document because he felt it was dividing the country, and that he personally was never a birther. Now, you're calling him a rabid birther, so, in all fairness, he disputes that.
Well, he may dispute it. I would just go ask the people of the Surprise Tea Party, because they're going to laugh at that comment. They're going to tell you this guy was the spearhead for the whole thing. This guy was always complaining that Mr. Obama was a communist, most likely born in Kenya. We need to find out where he was born. I think that makes you a birther. Now he wants to tell you it was for some other purpose. Let me tell you another lie that Mr. Riley says in that radio interview. Mr. Riley says that this issue was solved the day the Secretary of State received Hawaii's verification letter. Let me give you the circumstances around that. That was the first month, I don't remember what it was March or May, I don't remember when it was. That was the first time we went to Hawaii. When we were in Hawaii, it got leaked through the sheriff's office that we were going there. The newspapers wanted to report on it. Arpaio intervened and asked the newspapers to at least wait until Monday morning. We arrived on a Saturday. We had planned to go to the Department of Health in Hawaii the following Wednesday, but because of the leak, we were forced to do it on Monday. Well, the newspapers in Hawaii picked up on the fact that we were there, and we wake up to news headlines that the sheriff sent his detectives to the state of Hawaii. The next day, the very next day, the verification is released after Bennett tried I don't know how many months to get it. It is released, and the verbiage on it was a joke. Mr. Riley contacts me, and I don't remember the time difference, how many hours it is, but it was earlier for us and later for him, if my memory serves. And he contacted me, and he said, I got the verification. This is complete nonsense. Look at the verbiage. It says absolutely nothing. This is not a verification. They didn't verify this. They didn't verify that. And he's rambling on and on and on and on. And I'm like, I know. I got it. We're going to deal with it. And that was the conversation I had with Mr. Riley. Now he wants you to believe that that matter was settled for him when that verification came out. I am going to tell you emphatically that is 100% a fallacy. It is just an unbelievable rendition of chain of events that didn't occur. So, you start to listen to what this guy says, and he thinks he's hurting me. This guy's own words are...
Mike, one of the things that I think kind of disturbed me was when listening to that Peter Boyle show is how quickly he bought everything hook, line, and sinker. There's that point where Brian Riley is saying everything from the first two press conferences has been completely debunked, and Boyles is there saying, yep, sure was. My thought was, debunked to whose satisfaction? Those OBOTs that Mr. Riley's been rubbing elbows with lately because he says he can't get time on other programs and on other websites. It hasn't been debunked to my satisfaction. I think we've got to be the only people in the country right now, Mike, running 1961 birth certificates through a Xerox 7655 and saving them in preview and tweaking the settings and seeing exactly what that setup can do and what it can't do. And right now, we know exactly what happens and exactly what you get spit out of the scanner, or it's not spit out, it's actually saved on the hard drive. But at any rate, whenever you run a 1961 long-form birth certificate from Hawaii through a Xerox 7655 and save it in preview. And I got to tell you, with that setup, with that series of events from long-form birth certificate to that particular scanner to being saved in preview on a hard drive results in isn't necessarily what we see in that PDF file posted at whitehouse.gov. Would you agree with that?
I would wholeheartedly agree with that, Mark.
Yeah. So, what is, given the fact that, how long has Mr. Riley been gone from the Cold Case Posse? I never heard his name.
I believe it's 2 years.
Okay, well, I was going to say, I've been involved for 2.5, and I never really, other than knowing he was the guy who brought the petition to Sheriff Arpaio, I never even knew he was in the Cold Case Posse.
Well, that's because, Mark, you were involved in a different level that Mr. Riley didn't know anything really about. So there was no reason to talk to you about him.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying I never heard his name except within the context of the surprise Tea Party. So I know for the second press conference, 2 of our experts ran over 1,200 tests. We've got guys that have run at least that many with the 7655, and I kept hearing that everything's been debunked and we haven't done any original research and all that kind of nonsense. How could he possibly know that if he left 2 years ago?
There would be absolutely no way. No way for him to know that at all. And here's the thing. Mr. Boyles, who claims to be really good friends with Jerry Corsi, applauds Jerry Corsi for all his efforts and all his work. By agreeing with Mr. Riley, when Mr. Riley said, this is why Boyles to me was like a lapdog, by agreeing with Mr. Riley as that everything has been debunked, you basically are saying Mr. Corsi's work was of no value. And that's just patently not true. Now, there was stuff that Jerry had that was just a waste of time to pursue, but that happens in any investigative process. For the OBOTs, the people that are familiar with this, your audience, they know what OBOTs are. Look, we've traced IP addresses back. Some of them come right out of the White House. We know some of these people work for DARPA. We kind of know what their deal is. And for them, running their PSYOPs campaign now for 5 years, I believe it is, against this issue, let me tell you something. Nobody would run that kind of operation if there was nothing to what you're saying. They would just let you make fools of yourself. But what they're trying to do is to take you and make you become a fool of them. And that's what Mr. Riley has turned into. He's a fool for them. He is the newest toy in their toolbox. and they're going to run him until he burns out. And Mr. Riley is going to go down as history as the Benedict Arnold of this whole movement. Mr. Riley has switched his position. To Peter Boyle's credit, at the end of that slanderous attack against me, against the sheriff, against Carl Gallups, Mr. Boyle asked only one question that was worth anything. And it was, Mr. Riley, do you believe the document is straight or is it fictitious or something to that effect? Mr. Riley, after trying to dance around the question to go back to, well, Hawaii verification is all I could deal with, I need to deal with facts, Mr. Riley was dancing, stuttering, when he finally said, I believe it's straight. Now, I'm going to tell you, any investigator worth his salt was able to tell you before he answered that the answer that was going to be given was going to be deceptive. Mr. Riley's heart of hearts, he knows the truth, but he just staked his claim. He went full Obot. That's what the guy is now. People can listen to him. They can listen to his rhetoric. He's going to run into some issues. Very soon he's going to be notified of what they are. But he's going to run his little mouth, and he's going to try to get on places. You have to understand something else, too. He's been closed out of a lot of sites that previously would take his op-eds. So he got closed out of a lot of places. Then what does he do? Someone that he vehemently hated was Orly Tates. He jumps into Orly Tates' camp. Doesn't take long before Orly Tates gets a taste of him and excludes him from her website. Now, if you're bashing me and the sheriff, to get excluded from there, that's pretty hard to do. But congratulations and kudos, Brian, because you pulled that one off. There's no other place for him to get an audience. He literally jumps into the arms of C and those other operatives there.
There's one thing that did concern me, and it's something that I think needs to be nipped in the bud, and it was strongly implied, if not directly stated, that with the second press conference, there was the issue of the 9 code. And I find it interesting that he is saying that because the picture came from 1968, we should have known that the codes being portrayed could not possibly have been valid. I'd like to ask him why the codes couldn't have stayed the same between 61 and 68. I didn't know that was a picture from 68. My recollection of events that time was that we were waiting on verification from the CDC. It came in at the last minute. I'm holding an email in my hand dated July 16, 2012, when I was told that we, in fact, had the verification from the CDC, which you would think would be an authoritative source, but he basically said we put out false information, erroneous information. I don't think he stated that we did it knowingly, but I think some people listening may have come to that incorrect conclusion. So let's talk about that 9 code. Everybody, the sheriff's office lied. The cold case posse lied. They knew that code was wrong. Go ahead.
I believe in the clip he says it was fraudulent. That's very different than saying it was a mistake. Mm-hmm. Fraudulent implies a nefarious attempt, a criminal act to deceive, versus a mistake is merely being an error. So he knows exactly what he was saying, and I know exactly what he was trying to infer.
Okay.
So what the story with the 9 code, which I got to tell you, they could beat that all they want. The story with the 9 code, when the press conference was 3 days away, the 9 code issue still was not resolved in my mind, and we needed to get verification.
Hey, Mike, do you remember someone else? Do you remember someone else who said it wasn't verified in their mind?
No, who was that?
Me.
I know it was. It wasn't, Mark. I mean, you and I discussed it. I'm like, Mark, I can't run with this. I can't do this like this. It may be right, but I'm not 100% convinced. So the only way we could find out if it was right was to get it from an official source, the U.S. government, the CDC in Atlanta. And for 2 feverish days, Jerry Corsi sent his associate, who this woman stayed in the lobby of the CDC for 8 hours a day for 2 days, trying to get the answer to this question. On the 3rd day, it was about 2.5 hours, I believe, before the press conference was going to go. At that point in time, the 9 code issue was not going to be in it. As fate would have it, attorney Larry Klayman happened to be in Phoenix, so he stopped in, wanted to say hello to the sheriff. Larry Klayman's associate, Sheriff Arpaio, myself, and Jerry Corsi were all in the conference room when the phone rang from the woman from the CDC. And I have her information, who she is. And she's not a clerk. She's a highly educated individual. Jerry put her on speakerphone. I remember Jerry sitting there with his fingers crossed. And she confirmed for us that what we were saying and requesting, what the number 9 meant, was in fact what it was. He asked her to repeat it. Are you saying this 9 in this box, yada, 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 means X? And she said yes. With that verification, we put the 9 code back in the press conference, and that's where it remains today.
What I can tell you is that the email I received was on July 16th. The press conference was on the 17th, so that must have happened the day before.
I don't know, Mark. It could have. I don't know. I don't.
Okay.
You know what? I don't really think so. What date do you have?
I've got July 16th. It's dated.
Oh, you know what? I think you were doing videos right up until that time. Is that what it was?
What it was is it took me, because you guys didn't verify with me that the CDC had verified the codes, because you guys didn't do that until, according to this email, 3:30 p.m. on the 16th. It took me until 2 hours before.
That's what it was.
I think truthfully, I think I found out about this 9 code video. This is like an extra one that I did. I found out about it like 2 days before the press conference. Yeah,
we got to get Jerry to send you that little picture of those codes.
Yeah, because I said, send me what you want me to put in the video. It was just a JPEG. It didn't have a date on it. I didn't know it came from the 1968 manual. But even if it had, if the person said that those codes were actually valid before that in 1961, it wouldn't have made a difference.
It's all Alinsky disinformation techniques. And what is the big hoopla about the little placard that appeared in the video? They're making a big deal out of something that is not a big deal at all. That's the issue.
It sure as heck won't be after the next press conference, I can tell you that.
No, I'm going to tell you, and this is, I'm really glad you said that. I want to make it really clear for your audience. The work that is being done now, after the second press conference, the mandate to vet Mr. Corsi's work ended. And at that point in time, Mr. Corsi and WMD elected not to cover the issue anymore. They were moving on to the Romney election. Well, Sheriff Arpaio asked me, he goes, Mike, is there anything here with this document? I mean, is there really something here other than just we have probable cause to think that it was tampered with? I said, I think there's a bigger story here, Sheriff. He goes, well, then I want you to find it. So then the mandate changed and the level of authority changed. And now we're the full-fledged criminal investigation leading up to those standards of probable cause, and we were now going to develop our own information. And that's what we've done a year and a half. So when people say it's taken 3 years, no. I had to deal with everybody else's work, civilian input, layperson input, and vet that information to get to where we were in the first half of this little venture. So everything that you're going to hear in the near future has been cultivated through this investigation.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.